a gavel. I'd like to call this meeting of the City of West Hollywood Rent Stabilization Commission on Thursday, June 11th to order. If you'll all stand as you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we have a Madam Secretary or Mr. Secretary tonight? Who's on staff?
It's Janine, Madam Secretary.
Madam Secretary, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Okay, Commissioner Charity.
Here.
Commissioner Kerpes.
Here.
Commissioner Maggio. Commissioner Martz.
Here.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Here.
Vice Chair Topchian.
Here.
Chair Bergstein.
I'm present, so we have a full quorum. Moving on from item 3 to item 4, approval of our agenda for today, June 11, 2020. Have we all had a chance to review tonight's agenda? Do you have any suggestions, corrections, or changes? If not, I'll be a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Madam Secretary, can I have a roll call vote on approval of the agenda?
Okay, Commissioner Charity.
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Kerpes.
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio. Commissioner Martz.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe. Commissioner O'Keefe?
Did you not hear me? Sorry.
No, I couldn't hear you. Vice Chair Topchian.
Aye.
Chair Bergstein.
Aye. The agenda is approved. Moving on to item 5 of our agenda, approval of our minutes from our last meeting back on February 27th. Everyone had a chance to review that, and if so, do you have any corrections or additions? If not, entertain a motion to approve. Commissioner O'Keefe?
I have one very small amendment. It said in the commissioner comments that Commissioner O'Keefe asked if there were any updates on priority of the commission, and I just asked that it be changed to priorities, plural. It was about the annual priorities.
Sure.
Thanks.
Any other commissioners have corrections or changes? If not, entertain a motion to accept as amended. So moved. Do you have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Charity.
Aye.
Commissioner Kerpes.
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio.
I just came on. I'm here.
You go.
Okay. Commissioner Martz.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Aye.
Vice Chair Topchian.
Aye.
Chair Bergstein.
Aye. The minutes have been approved. Moving on to item 6, public comments. Madam Secretary, do we have any public speakers this evening?
Yes, we do. We have, the first one's going to be John Erickson. So let me just get him out of the waiting room.
Okay.
John, can you hear me? Hello, John? John Erickson? So let me just get him.
Hello, commissioners. Thanks so much. And I hope you're all staying happy and safe and healthy during this time. Yes, I can. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair. I hope you're all staying safe, happy, and healthy during this time. John Erickson, East Side renter for the City of West Hollywood. I wanted to call into your meeting today because I, like many residents, are starting to look at the ways in which both our economy is reopening, but also the ways in which we're going to have a lot of issues coming before many of us as renters, as property owners, as people who own homes as well here in the City of West Hollywood. And the ways in which in your discussion tonight for not only your item, but ways you can think about how the city can continue to get involved in educating renters from all walks of life, and ways that, you know, we're going to have to really start thinking out of the box, but more broadly to protect not only our existing people who are in our rent stabilized units, but also people who are living here in the city and who weren't able to work remotely, lost their jobs, or continue to face an economic hardship as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, in June, 30% of Americans missed their housing payments. And although that's down slightly, just from 31% in May, it's still up from the 24% in April. And while we're continuing to see these payments being missed, we're going to have a lot before us, thinking largely. So I've been on several of the chamber's housing events, but from commercial businesses as well as real estate. And I've seen a lot of residents come on thinking it was applying to them. So in your discussion tonight, I hope you'll challenge the city as well as put forth ideas for ways in which our amazing rent stabilization and housing staff can put on their building block programs, as well as continuing to create new programs that residents can call into, utilize, and access in this virtual world we all live in today. That concludes my comment. I hope you all have a wonderful evening and stay safe.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Do we have any further public speakers?
Yes, we have Helen Shapiro. Let me get her out of the waiting room. Helen, can you hear me?
He's not. But in Palm Springs. And
Helen?
he's getting more than the guy.
Yes,
Hi, we have unmuted you for the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready to give your public comment?
I am, there, yes, I am, sure. Now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The reason that I was calling in is because it seems that there's a lot of attention and thought given to tenants, and not any that I'm aware of given to landlords. We're still required to meet our obligations, our mortgage payments, our taxes, our insurance, HOA fees, which for me in this building anyway is $2,400 a month, which could easily be somebody's rental payment. And then we're just supposed to take the word of the tenant, which in my case I know drives around in 100,000 plus cars and can very well afford this rent, but chooses not to because he's abiding by the rent moratorium and is not required to pay me, not required to show me that he can't pay, and basically has told me that everything is on his terms, and if I don't like it, I need to talk to the city. And so that's why I'm calling in. It just seems that everything's very lopsided. And my husband and I are both in our 60s. We were looking forward to retiring, and then of course the pandemic, and I understand that everybody needs help, but so do we. And it just seems like all the burden is being placed on us. Not only are we not getting rent, which we rely on for our rental income as part of our, to make us live every single day, and also to pay all our obligations. We now are looking at maybe close to $100,000 between our rental properties. And by the way, we are owners in West Hollywood, and we also live here in West Hollywood. And so basically asking me to become a lender, not asking me, forcing me to become a lender without any documentation provided by my tenant, and at no interest, no penalty for 1 year. And it's nothing about what I just said sounds fair. And I think if you were in my shoes, you might see it a little differently. But imposing these restrictive rent moratoriums are probably illegal, to be honest. I'm not an attorney, but it just seems very unfair towards landlords, and we're property owners, and our property taxes go towards everybody's wages. So we should be considered as well. I mean, I'm at risk of losing everything I've worked for my entire life because my tenants choose not to pay. And that's all I have to say. And if anyone's thinking about extending this, it's already 1 month beyond the LA rent moratorium. I think that's ridiculous. It's already gone far too long, 4 months without payment, 3 different tenants. It's ruining our, I mean, it's creating so much stress and havoc on our lives. We're so
That's time.
obligated. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further public speakers?
Yes, we have a Guy Fideli. Hold on just a moment. Let me admit him. Hello, Guy.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. Everything Ms. Shapiro said, and I have a lot of clients that are not getting paid their rent. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. All right. I'm a realtor. Hello?
Oh,
And I
sir,
have-
are you listening on a couple of devices? You might need to mute the background device because we're getting an echo.
No, you know what? It should be on mine.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but there's just an echo.
I know, right. Is there an echo now? Can
No,
you
it's
hear
still
me?
it's still the same.
No. Well, that's on the dog. Okay, fine.
Oh, okay,
Can you hear
there
me
we
now?
are. Yes.
All right, I'm dealing with several clients of mine, and basically they are residents of West Hollywood. They are owners and they are landlords in West Hollywood, and they know that. I said clients of mine. Second of all, the rents may range from $4,000 to $12,000. All right, and basically none of them have been paid since April. They just go by the COVID laws. None of them have been required to supply any documentation to prove that this is affecting them. All right. And basically, these people, my clients, are not making profits. What their rent does is basically cover their costs of HOA dues, city property tax, mortgages, and there is no profit. All right. No profit. So they're dwelling into what they can and will possibly be forced to sell. All right. It's causing a lot of financial difficulty for several people. And just one specific, all they do is say the COVID. All right. And there's, like I said, whatever form or way, they should be able to prove that there's a financial distress to begin with. All right. On their part. And none of them are doing it. Are they required to do this? Number one, penalty, it doesn't make any sense. And then you expect people to not pay rent and to be able to double pay what they can't pay now in the future? That seems impossible. So they couldn't have financial difficulties now. I'm also an accountant. It doesn't make sense, to be quite honest with you. So, and these are the people paying the city of Los Angeles. There's no property tax deductions. Okay, maybe it'll be late next year. How does that help people now? Their mortgages aren't met, their homeowners' dues aren't met, and they're required to. They will get foreclosed on by the association. That's the way it works. And when they're basing this, and now you're looking to extend this, I'm reading constantly, I'm seeing rents ranging from $1,000 to $1,400 you're basing this on. And then I believe that something came out about some grants where you'll help landlords or tenants up to $2,000. I have
Okay, and that's
people
time.
that are losing. Thank you.
Do we have any further public speakers, ma'am?
There's one person in the waiting room. Let me ask if they'd like to speak.
Thank you.
But do we get to hear it? You don't hear it? You're not hearing it. You don't hear public speakers.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Hi, would you like to make a public comment?
I was actually just hoping to get some information, but I am currently, someone would like me to leave my apartment after 10 years, so I'm not quite sure how to chime in.
Okay, hold on just a moment. Okay, how would we address this caller?
It sounds like a,
Perhaps we can have her speak with staff during regular business hours. I'm not sure this is a public comment. This sounds like a request for assistance by a tenant. So
Okay.
Mr. Noonan, can we provide a phone number for her to call tomorrow or an email address so that she can ask questions of the appropriate staff member?
Yes, happy to do that. Our information line at the city is the best way to reach someone for information. It is 323-848-6450. Also, we have an email address. It's rsh@weho.org. So 323-848-6450, rsh@weho.org.
And in any case, any resident has questions, if you don't have the phone number or the email address, you can always just go to the city's webpage, which is just weho.org, type in the search engine rent stabilization, and that will bring up the contact numbers and emails for you as well. We encourage you to reach out to staff for assistance. Madam Secretary, any further speakers?
No, no further speakers.
I'll just say we are not allowed to comment on what the public has brought forward, but I'm hoping that the earlier speakers will stay on the meeting for the rest of the evening and listen to our discussion. Perhaps some of the questions and concerns you've talked about may be spoken about or addressed during tonight's meeting. And with that, we'll go to item 7, Manager's Report. Mr. Noonan.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. I'd like to review your look ahead calendar with you at this time. This evening, you will receive a presentation on the City of West Hollywood's eviction moratorium and assistance for renters and landlords. Additionally, we will provide information on LA County Department of Public Health guidance for multifamily housing. Looking ahead, the Commission will be meeting twice a month going forward. Your next meeting on June 25th will be the announcement of the annual general adjustment, which will be effective come September 1st. There's no other items scheduled for that evening. On July 9th and July 23rd, both of those evenings do have 2 appeals scheduled, both. And so the only other item that is scheduled at this time is on the meeting for July 9th, which is the reorganization of the chair and the vice chair. August 13th does not have any items scheduled as of yet. Typically, the Commission has held its study session in August, and so we've held that as a placeholder open if the Commission would like to hold its study session at that time. And then resuming in August 27th and September 10th, there's 1 appeal scheduled both evenings. And an informational discussion item is also scheduled for both of those evenings. Now, we also have Corey Plank, the Acting Director of Human Services and Rent Stabilization, with us this evening. And I just would like to take a moment and check if she had anything that she would like to add to the report.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening, Commissioners. Nothing to add at this point. Just want to let you know that the staff has been working incredibly hard to serve the community during this time, making sure all of the available resources that you'll hear about later are accessed by as many people as possible. And so I'm happy to be here to answer any other questions that you might have, but really want to just have a note of appreciation for how hard they've been working and the service they've been providing. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Noonan at this point? If so, raise your hand and we can unmute you one at a time. Commissioner Maggio.
My question is, these meetings now will be via Zoom and not in person. Is that correct?
That is correct. For the time being, all meetings will be virtual, held here in Zoom.
Second question, then you will have hard copies for us when it is related to the public hearings. Is that correct?
We're looking at that.
So,
at this time, we're not able to do hard copies, but I have heard this, and I know that it's a request of a couple of commissioners. I do want to say right now that we aren't able to provide hard copies, but I am looking at it. I see Corey Plank also turned on her monitor. I don't know if she has any other thoughts.
Right now, the direction we have is that we can't safely provide the hard copies, but we will be looking at, as soon as we're able to do that, we will. But for now, all of the council, the commission, and when the advisory boards come on, they will all be packets provided electronically.
So what will be the process in following an agenda on Zoom? Do we have to have a double screen here, or just study it all?
Let me, so for you, Commissioner Maggio, and for any of the other commissioners, why don't we book some time individually? I'm happy to work through the process and come up with an approach that will work best for each commissioner, because certainly we want you to be comfortable at the meetings, and certainly when we get to an appeal, we would want you to be very comfortable reviewing the materials and participating in the meeting fully. So I'm available, anytime this next week and the following week. I'll give you a call and we can set something up. And then, of course, anyone else, please reach out to me and let me know if you would also like to set up a one-on-one to discuss and go over the schematics of reviewing an appeal in the Zoom meeting.
Of course, if it's sent via email, then I could very well probably print it out myself. Would that be correct?
Yeah, and we will most likely have to send the appeals as we did this last one through a Dropbox, just simply because of the size of the document. However, you would be able to access that file and print that out yourself, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any further questions for Mr. Noonan at this time? So I will just echo Commissioner Maggio's concern. I have difficulty working from an electronic copy for an appeal, particularly when the exhibits are voluminous and sometimes can be a little confusing as to the timeline as to when photographs have been submitted. So if staff is able to find a way to provide us with hard copies for those of us that desire those, or reimburses for ink cartridges if we print them out at home. So I have a quick question for Mr. Noonan. Let me just get to that page. And I forewarned him I'd be asking, as I do each meeting, if there's any status on the city's application for FEMA grant money to help landlords with the earthquake retrofit costs.
Thank you. We do not have any additional information at this time. I believe that we are still in the consideration for one of the grant application processes. However, that is still pending and in process. So as that evolves, I will certainly let the commission know.
On the same subject, we're coming up on the one-year deadline for property owners to have submitted their initial engineering report. With the COVID crisis, are you aware, has that deadline been extended?
I'm not aware if the deadline has been extended. I'm happy to find out and report back.
Okay. Sorry, I'm flipping between screens here. I'm not quite as savvy as. So with that, we will go to commission comments. Commissioners, if you'd like to make any comments at this time, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Commissioner Kirby, you're raising your hand? Yes, Commissioner Kirby.
Yes, I just wanted to make a couple announcements. They're not specifically related to rent stabilization, but they're of public concern. Many people because of COVID-19 have lost their employment and are trying to receive benefits through Employment Development Department and having difficulties getting through to those agencies. If anyone in West Hollywood, or if you're a resident in our district, or AD 50, Assembly District 50, you can contact the Office of Assemblymember Richard Bloom. If you're having difficulties in contacting EDD, or if your application is pending and you can't get a hold of anybody, we're not going to be able to work a miracle for you or anything like that. It will still take some time, but you can contact our office at 310-450-0041 or go to our website. Just Google Richard Bloom and click on Contact Richard and enter in your information along with your EDD account number, and we will try to assist you and speed that process up a little bit. Also, for everyone's information, DMV opened up the remaining offices, their field offices today. It's still by appointment only. If you had an appointment with DMV and it got canceled because of COVID-19, you will be getting a call from DMV to reschedule that. Most of their services are now available online. They've got a new website, dmv.ca.gov you can go to, and most services can be done online. And if you had a driver's license that expires before the end of July, it has been extended to the end of July. And if you are over the age of 70 and your driver's license expires before July 31st, it's been extended 120 days. So don't need to panic. Those extensions are automatic. And if you're over the age of 70, you will receive something in the mail at some point, but don't worry if you don't, because your license is good for another 120 days. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Kerpes, if you are aware, I've had friends from outside of the city of West Hollywood that are having significant issues with their unemployment benefits. I've been suggesting they contact their assemblyman's field office. Do you think, or have you heard, is this kind of common that each of the representatives is able to answer questions or provide assistance across the board?
Absolutely. So all 120 offices, the 80 assembly offices and the 40 Senate offices can help you. You only need to call either your senator or your state assembly member. Don't need to call both. It won't speed it up. Actually, it'll slow it down. So call one of those offices, have them help you, give them the information. And you basically, what happens is you're put on a wait list, but you are on a wait list that's going to be handled before most of the other folks out there that didn't call their assembly or Senate office. So you're still going to have to wait 10 to 15 days is what the wait time is now, but at least you know you're guaranteed that somebody's looking at your application and it's not sitting on somebody's desk somewhere, just sitting there.
Thank you, Commissioner Kerpes. Any other commission comments at this point? I do have one. There was an article in the La Brea newspaper last month that the city of Beverly Hills was having their very first rent commission meeting. And I contacted their staff person. I wanted to reach out to them, reaching out as a commissioner, but not on behalf of the commission. And this is what I wrote to the Beverly Hills commissions. I want to take this opportunity to congratulate each of you on your appointments to Beverly Hills' first Rent Stabilization Commission. I am currently the chair of the City of West Hollywood's Rent Stabilization Commission. During the 20+ years I've been a resident of West Hollywood, I've had the privilege and honor to serve on a number of boards and commissions, but by far the most fulfilling work for me has been as a Rent Stabilization Commissioner, as the first and only landlord to have been appointed. I truly believe that the work we do on our commission, protecting the rights of our residential tenants and landlords, making recommendations to City Council on modifications to existing ordinances or suggesting additional ones, and working on legislative items is critically important with profound effects. I hope for each of you that you find your work challenging and fulfilling. While I certainly have no experience or guidance for you on Beverly Hills issues, if you ever wish to speak to me about my experience here in your neighboring city of West Hollywood, I'm always available to you. Very truly yours. So anxious to hear how their first meeting went, and they are actually one half landlords and one half tenants, a little different than ours. We'll move on to item 9. We have no appeals. Moving on to item 10, new business, City of West Hollywood eviction moratorium.
Chair, I believe you have other commissioners. I believe Commissioner Marks would wish
I'm
to.
sorry. Get back to that screen. Commissioner Marks, did you raise your hand? Yes, sorry.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Commissioner Marks.
Got it. All right. I just want to encourage everyone to continue to be tested for COVID. I volunteer every Saturday with CORE, which is Sean Penn's organization that does a lot of the testing in Los Angeles County. One update is the drive-through testings have traditionally been doing throat swabs that you self-administer. They are switching or have switched in the last few days to a self-administered nasal test. So it's a little bit more effective. So you will be doing it in the front of your nose, not deep in like you see in the video. So people shouldn't be too scared, but even that way, it's supposed to be more effective. So I've been doing it for, I think, 7 or 8 weeks now. I also am working on their legal team. It's been a great experience. So I want to remind everyone we're not out of the woods yet. So especially if you're protesting or involved in anything like that, get tested, and hopefully we'll be out of this sooner than later. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any further comments from commission at this point? And Mr. Noonan, if you'd like to take it away with the staff report.
Thank you. I will not be giving you the presentation this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Yasmin Spatirio, one of our rent stabilization and housing information coordinators, who will give you the presentation this evening. So take it away, Yasmin. Be sure to turn on your mic, Yasmin.
Nope.
You.
My screen and pull
There you
this
go.
up at the same time. 1 second. All right. Can everybody see my screen and hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So I am excited to be bringing you this presentation here tonight. That is actually one that we presented to our community members on May 28th. So just over a week ago. And it's one that provides an overview of both guidances on what to do and day-to-day steps to take as tenants and landlords living in multifamily housing or managing multifamily housing, but also providing an overview of what our eviction moratorium is and some important resources for our community members. So as we're looking at how the COVID-19 pandemic is just a series of moving parts and we get new information every day, we just wanted to make sure to put together the information that we had available and present it all in one place, make it a bit more accessible for people. So we were looking at the LA County Department of Public Health, their document that they put out specifically on multifamily housing, and that was called the Guidance on Multifamily Housing. And also putting together information, as I mentioned, on our eviction moratorium, and then pulling together those resources that we saw, both for tenants and for landlords. One thing to keep in mind is that the information provided here was as of May 27th, 2020, and that information has not actually changed. The information that you'll see here today, even though it was current as of May 27th, I checked it today, it has not changed from that date. So it is still current information. So we're going to start out by talking about that guidance or the different guidances that were recommended by the LA County Department of Public Health. The main one, importantly, being that communication is key. So as we're all navigating this situation where, again, the information we're getting an overload of information, or information just keeps changing, it's vitally important that both tenants and landlords are communicating to each other about the status of their specific buildings or processes that they have going on. So for apartment managers, owners, and HOA boards, this would look like just providing the most accurate and timely communications, both with staff or employees that would be interacting with residents, as well as the residents themselves. And right now, this is looking like a few different changes in the way that they communicate with the residents. Traditionally, we know that you might mail or post a notice to a tenant, maybe post to a community board, and share information that way about any changes to the way in which things are handled at the property. But now, because people might be quarantining in their unit and maybe not leaving their unit as much, or if they've been confirmed positive for COVID-19, might be in isolation and definitely not leaving their unit. And so a community board might not be the best way to communicate information anymore to all residents. So there is an encouraging message here of thinking outside of the box. If there's a website through which tenants maybe pay rent or otherwise get news that guidances on where to pay rent or changes on how they access amenities such as the pool or the laundry room, that those messages be posted on the website. Or if there's a mobile phone based application that you use to receive rent or provide those updates, that you provide them there, as well as community bulletin boards, text messages, emails. Just being creative in how you push out that information is really important. And then the type of information that should be pushed out right now are things like changes to office policies, providing updates on what prevention measures are being taken at the property, or just giving updates. We're going to be putting tape down that marks the 6 feet apart measurement in the laundry room, so that when you're using that, how far away you should be standing from your neighbors, as well as those resources that you might get from attending these webinars or visiting our website, that maybe posting those resources as well through the channels listed right now as far as websites, but also through community bulletin boards if applicable. For residents, we highly recommend communicating as early as possible if they're unable to pay rent. That's going to be the case. We'll talk later on the eviction moratorium, what kind of notice tenants should be giving when they're going to be delaying rent payment during this period of emergency. But in general, our recommendation is that this communication happens as early as possible, so the landlord is expecting this, and it's not coming out of left field, or they're not wondering what's going on with that month's rent. So one of the things that will be, or one of the terms that will be mentioned throughout this presentation is social distancing. And while we all may, have a general understanding of what that is, I did want to share specifically what the LA County Public Health Department considers or defines social distancing as. So straight from their documents, they define social distancing as these 4 points. 1, maintaining the 6 feet apart from people who are not part of the same household. 2, frequently washing your hands with soap and water for at least 20 seconds or using hand sanitizer. 3, wearing a cloth face covering when out in public or in contact with others who are not part of your same household. And finally, avoiding all social interaction outside of the household if you are presenting symptoms or sick with fever or cough. So that's how we define or how social distancing is defined. And moving on to some prevention tips, right? So we mentioned that this is to provide guidance on what multifamily housing during the time of COVID-19 looks like. So these are some specific tips on how to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The first one being that all employees, residents, and visitors should practice safe social distancing and use face coverings while in common areas, shared common spaces, and public areas of the complex. So as I mentioned before, putting markings down on the ground in areas that are highly trafficked, like the laundry room or pool areas, or there's a garden area, things like that. But just making every effort that people can safely social distance when they're outside of their units. Secondly, that when doing repairs in units, both the residents and the staff members should wear face coverings and try to maintain that social distancing if at all possible. Another recommendation is that windows be opened while repairmen or staff are in the residence unit in order to provide the highest level of ventilation while the repair is going on. So repairs are allowed to happen, routine maintenance is allowed to happen, but again, it should be taking these recommendations or keeping these recommendations in mind for the safety of both the staff member and the resident. Next are the fitness areas, and this was one of the items that changed right before we put this webinar on, I believe the day before. But fitness areas and swimming pools were addressed. One, that fitness areas, including basketball and tennis courts, community or rec rooms, are still to be closed to occupants or residents of the property. But as of May 26th, residential swimming pools, hot tubs, and saunas were able to reopen as long as they followed protocols and measures to make sure everybody's socially distanced or able to social distance. So these protocols that were specifically mentioned by the LA County Public Health Department were that the use of the pool would be restricted to 25% maximum capacity of the pool, or 10 people at a time, whichever is smaller. That if possible, an appointment system be set up in order to encourage limited pool use, as well as making sure everybody has access to the pool, changing deck layouts to ensure that seating areas allow for 6 feet between residents. So if we're talking about having like lounge furniture that half of it is put away and making sure what remains is 6 feet apart, and that again, it's safely marked on the ground to ensure people are maintaining social distancing. One thing that was clarified the day after this came out, so May 27th, they did clarify the guest policy, which is that the swimming pools can go ahead and reopen, but that there should be no guests allowed. So we're talking about just the resident households having access to the pool at the property. Another big topic that came up was about cleaning during this time. And the recommendation is that these public areas, common areas, common shared spaces such as the elevators, that they be routinely cleaned, especially if they're high touch areas such as the door handles, handrails, elevator buttons, the laundry machines, and staff that are doing the cleaning, that they should use protective clothing and equipment. They should use Environmental Protection Agency or EPA registered products that can clean and disinfect and remove the germs or kill the germs to prevent the spread of COVID-19, to immediately throw away all disposable cleaning items, wash hands frequently, and make sure that waste baskets are being emptied and all that. People have minimal access to the items that were used to do the cleaning. Routinely is not defined further than that by the public health department, but it is just highly recommended that a schedule is established depending on how many residents, depending on frequency of use. Every building will be a little bit different, but just making sure that there's a process in place of routine cleaning going on in each building. Another tip was finding strategies to keep communal laundry rooms open while ensuring physical distancing, similar to the pool area, that this might require a sign-up sheet or process, maybe an appointment system, again, if possible, to limit the number of people that are using it at any given time, marking the machines and the floor space to guide people to stay 6 feet apart. Is also a helpful tip. Encouraging residents to call management at the front desk rather than coming in person when they have issues or concerns. Being able to maintain that proper social distancing when speaking with managers is really best, in order to, again, keep both staff and residents as safe as possible. Or if there is an office at the building and someone wants to come in the office in person, that they mark the proper distance away from the front desk staff for the safety of all who are working there and are visiting the office. So all in all, I think we're hearing a lot here how important it is to social distance while still maintaining the access to amenities and to management for residents if they have concerns or questions going on with their unit and their tenancy, but doing so in a way that really places a priority on everybody's safety. Some personal prevention actions to be taken. So the ones that I just reviewed were more so what can be done as a manager to limit the spread, some prevention measures from the manager standpoint. But I did also want to make sure to include some personal prevention actions. So what each individual should be doing, which is following the social distance recommendation of washing your hands often with soap and water, or using hand sanitizers, covering our coughs and sneezes, making sure not to touch our mouth, eyes, and nose without washing our hands, maintaining that 6 feet of separation from people who are not in our household, and wearing a cloth face covering when in public areas. I'll be touching upon the West Hollywood specific face covering order, but for now, just making sure that we're all wearing our face coverings when in public areas, avoiding contact with people if we know they're sick, staying home if you feel sick, staying home for at least 3 days after recovering from COVID-19. And then just following the self-isolation and self-quarantine protocols that are recommended by the Public Health Department. So as I mentioned, the city of West Hollywood does have its own face covering order, and that went into effect on May 23rd, and that required everyone, including essential workers and the general public, to wear face coverings while they're outside of their household. So this can include things like scarves, bandanas, or similar coverings that would reduce the transmission of germs anytime they're out and about. Face coverings are not required for young children under 2 years old, or anyone who has trouble breathing, anyone who's otherwise unable to remove a face covering without assistance. And as far as enforcement goes, the West Hollywood Sheriff's Station would be the agency to monitor compliance of this ordinance. So you'll see the number here at the bottom of this slide, but I'll also be including it in a couple of other slides if you don't have it here. But essentially, if somebody has concerns about what they're seeing in the community, maybe a neighbor or whoever not following this ordinance, they can contact the sheriff's department, and they are ready to provide education and warnings about this specific ordinance, as well as cite if appropriate, if someone's not, if someone's in violation of this specific ordinance. I mentioned both self-quarantine and self-isolation, and I just wanted to provide the difference or the distinction between the two, where self-quarantine is that 14-day quarantine period that is required if you are in close contact or exposed to someone diagnosed or suspected to have COVID-19. Whereas self-isolation is the quarantine requirement for somebody who's tested positive for COVID-19. So isolation would mean staying home until at least 10 days have passed after symptoms first appeared, and at least 3 days after recovery. And my understanding is that the recommendation is you would only leave your place of quarantine if you are going to get necessary medical care at that point. So going back to the topic of multifamily housing, if we have a resident who needs to self-quarantine or isolate in their unit, they may choose to share that information or to let you know that that's what they're doing, and ask for assistance to allow them to do that, to isolate in their unit. So that might mean suspending access to the apartment for routine maintenance. If someone's tested positive for COVID-19, they may request that, that specific cleaning doesn't get done. And at that point, only emergency repairs should be going on in the unit. As a landlord, this might mean working out an arrangement for notifying residents when packages arrive. Again, each building will have a little bit different situation, but if we're talking about a building where maybe there's a gate and where packages are held, it's not safe for them to be there long term. If somebody's self-isolating, they might not know that their package is there waiting for them. So working out some sort of system of figuring out, when packages arrive, how do we get them to those who might be in isolation? Or how do we at least notify that they're available? Maybe they can get a neighbor or a friend to come and bring it by to their front step. Scheduling door side garbage pickup, if that's an option for someone that's in isolation. Allowing residents or being aware that residents may start to employ services that they might not otherwise have, such as dog walkers, in order to get their pets those daily walks, and just keeping the privacy of the tenants in mind. So going back to that item that I mentioned of someone not wanting or someone testing positive for COVID-19 and not wanting to have someone enter the unit at that time. If you're going to let a vendor know to skip that unit, to make sure you're not mentioning it's because of COVID-19 that we're skipping that unit. Just let them know, the service is suspended for that specific apartment, and we'll come back to it at a later time. Oh, sorry about that. Skipped over a few. As we're addressing these different, changes to policies, recognizing that someone might be in quarantine or isolating based on their exposure to COVID-19, we want to make sure we're careful about the information that we share. People's medical status is protected by the HIPAA regulations, so make sure to not share information about the health and status of your residents. If they choose to share that information, that's the decision that they make. But otherwise, make sure as a landlord or as a property manager that the information you're sharing is not related to the medical status of the tenants. And again, just continued frequent cleaning of common areas, and letting tenants know that, this is our schedule, this is how often we're cleaning, will help to reassure other tenants. If a tenant chooses to share that they're positive for COVID-19 with their neighbors, this is a step to take to kind of reassure other tenants that they're safe and that things are being handled by the recommendations of the public health department. And that covers the guidances specific to multifamily housing. I did want to share some of the contact information to the agencies that I mentioned, one of which is, of course, the LA County Department of Public Health. They have a variety of different ways of reaching them, including their website, calling 211. They have a number specifically for reporting public health concerns and an email. And then in regards to the City of West Hollywood specific face covering ordinance, I mentioned the West Hollywood Sheriff Station, and their number is there too for anyone who may not have it yet. This information is also available on our website at the www.weho.org coronavirus page. If you visit the Renter Resources page under the main coronavirus section of the website that's been set up, you can also access this information here. The contact information as well as the guidance on multifamily housing. All right, so I'm going to move on to talk about our second topic, the residential eviction moratorium. On March 16th, the City Council declared a local emergency and we adopted the residential eviction moratorium. It was then amended on April 6th to prevent rent increases during and after the emergency period for units that are subject to the rent stabilization or the rent stabilization annual general adjustment. It also prevented eviction for unauthorized occupants and extended the time to pay delayed rent for tenants to 12 months. On May 4th, the City Council extended the eviction moratorium through July 31st, 2020. So those are the important dates to keep in mind. As mentioned, the rent increases or the prevention of rent increases began on April 6th and runs through 60 days after the expiration of the local emergency period. So again, for those units that are subject to the rent stabilization AGA or annual general adjustment, there can be no rent increases during this time period. And then lastly, the eviction moratorium is temporary and it currently is in effect until July 31st, 2020, unless extended. An overview of it includes, of course, no eviction. So this prevents evictions for non-payment of rent due to financial impacts that are related to COVID-19. It states that tenants have 12 months to pay after the expiration of the local emergency, any of that rent payment that is delayed. And it provides an eviction defense So no 3-day notices or unlawful detainers can be issued during the emergency period or 12 months after the local emergency expires. It includes a tenant harassment portion. So if a 3-day notice is served or a credit agency is notified of non-payment during this period of local emergency, this is considered to be tenant harassment. And as far as paying delayed rent, we are highly encouraging tenants to work with landlords to create payment plans. It's not a requirement, but it is highly encouraged. As we started out the presentation tonight, I talked about the importance of communication and how, and this is just a piece of that, is as we're nearing the end of the emergency period, that we have the conversation of what repayment will look like. And really the best way is to lay out a plan and have a repayment plan in place. That way both parties know what to expect. And then of course the rent increases, that there would be no rent increases as of April 6th. So for tenants who would need to let their landlord know they're unable to pay all or a portion of their rent due to financial impacts they've experienced related to COVID-19, the steps to take would be to notify their landlord in writing of their financial impact they've experienced related to COVID-19, and do this before or within 30 days after the rent is due. They would provide documentation or an explanation of the financial impacts related to COVID-19, and pay the delayed rent within 12 months after the expiration of the local emergency period. So both tenants and landlords are highly encouraged to keep copies of all this documentation and correspondence, because if we're talking about, right now the emergency period happening and keeping track of rent that is paid, if there's a portion of the rent being paid or maybe the full amount is being delayed, just wanted to keep everything organized, that if 12 months come, August 2021, you don't want to be having to look for that documentation or lose track of it, anything like that. So just keeping a copy of all the documentation together. The department also put together a template letter for tenants, and that can be found again on our weho.org/coronavirus page. If you visit the renter resources page, there is a template letter that guides tenants through what kind of information they need to provide for their landlord and serves as that notification to the landlord that their rent will be delayed, specifically because of a COVID-19 related financial impact. Some resources for the community. So there's a few different resources that are available. We've highlighted a few in each category here, but there are more available if you visit the renter resources page. The first one being the, the Council of Jewish Women, which provides non-sectarian and non-gender specific rental assistance to WeHo residents. They have a phone number here and ask residents to leave a message, and somebody will return their call. There's also Alliance for Housing and Healing, or Aid for AIDS, and they provide financial assistance to persons living with HIV or AIDS to pay for rent, utilities, and pharmaceuticals. They also provide supplemental rental assistance, so all older adults residing in the city of West Hollywood who may be experiencing a rent burden. So they too have a phone number where our residents can contact them. And lastly, the Jewish Free Loan organization, they provide free or interest-free loans, and they have both a website and a phone number in order to contact them. Some legal resources include Betzetic Legal Services. They can be reached at 323-549-5841, as well as their website. Coalition for Economic Survival can be reached by email at the moment. So they're helpinglrenters@gmail.com. They ask that residents in need of legal assistance provide their name, phone number, address, and whether they live in a rent stabilized unit or not. along with a short summary of their issue in the email that they send. And for those of you familiar with our weekly tenant rights clinics over at Plummer Park, this is the organization that puts those on. The weekly tenant rights clinics are currently closed until further notice, but you, again, are still able to reach them directly by sending an email to the agency. And then lastly, the Eviction Defense Network. They have a phone number there and a website in order to reach them for services. For mortgage assistance, sorry, I'm having a issue here. 1 second. Oh. So for mortgage assistance, there is the Financial Protection Bureau here. There's a menu here at the top of my screen that doesn't let me read that first word. If someone can read it out to me.
To mortgage option.
Oh, the mortgage financial
Sorry,
protection.
Consumer finance.
Oh, consumer. Thank you. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Thank you. So they provide, this is a website that provides a guide to the variety of different mortgage relief options that are available. And so there's a link here, and I do apologize. It is a longer link, but again, this presentation is available as part of the agenda tonight for tonight's meeting, but also available on our website. But if you visit there, they provide a lot of really helpful information on mortgage relief and assistance options. The CARES Act, or the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, was passed by Congress, and information about that act is again available on this website. And then the Jewish Free Loan Organization also provides assistance for landlords in that they provide interest-free loans of a higher amount than that of which would be available to tenants. So the same number would be called for any landlord or property owner who would need assistance from that organization. And again, for access to these resources, I highly recommend visiting our renter resources page, which is accessed by going to weho.org/coronavirus. And that includes all the different information on the eviction moratorium, the emergency rental assistance available, both for the agencies that I mentioned here tonight, but also those additional resources that are available, utility assistance programs, legal resources, and other information. And then, of course, for any community member that may still have questions, have concerns, or just need guidance on their specific situation, we really encourage you to contact the Rent Stabilization and Housing Information Line, which is 323-848-6450. The information coordinators, like myself, are available to answer those questions for you or guide you in the right direction if we're unable to answer that question for you. You can also email in your question to rsh@weho.org, and we are glad to provide the information via email as well. We are available Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And if you contact us at 6 p.m., you should expect a phone call the next business day. But thank you so much. That's all that I have for now. Again, I'll leave this screen up for now, although I'm not sure if we want to have me stop sharing the screen. But I highly encourage you to visit the coronavirus resource page if you haven't already. It's a really great resource. Thank you.
Thanks so much for giving that really detailed presentation, Yasmin. Really appreciate it. So, Chair, we'll leave this slide up for just a moment, and then Yasmin will stop sharing her screen. And at this time, I turn it over to you and to the commissioners to hear what questions you might have.
So if I'm correct, this is a receive and file. We will not be taking action on this evening, but this is a time for our commissioners to ask questions and comments. And our city clerk, Yvonne Corker, has asked that we do this in alphabetical order. So I'll be calling on commissioners alphabetically. If you're not ready to share, feel free to pass, and I'll come back to you before the vice chair and the chair make our comments. So with that, Commissioner Charity, any questions or comments?
No real comments. Thank you, Yasmin. I just know that I've run into many people who are facing tremendous economic hardship right now and really lost their life's work. So I'm glad to see that we implemented some of these things in our city to protect our rent stabilized tenants. Thank you.
Commissioner Kerpes?
Yeah. Thank you for that report. It's very thorough and really appreciate it, and hoping that people were able to watch it from home and learn from it. I did have a question about and I'll ask my question, but then I'll keep on talking for a moment. But one of the questions I had was just about the 30 days following the date that the rent is due. It seems like it would be helpful to property owners to know prior to the date that the rent was due, rather than 30 days after. It almost seems like well, it's almost time to pay next month's rent by then. So I just had a question about that, what the logic was behind that. And then also, if the city was looking into, as we heard from some of the public speakers in the very beginning of the meeting, concern about property owners not being able to pay for their mortgages. I know that it's that at the federal level, they've done some things to provide mortgage relief. And they've also heard mixed messages about the SBA loans, the EI, the Economic Injury Direct Loan Programs. Those SBA loans, I believe, do apply to, or can be applied for by property owners who aren't receiving rent, to help pay for those mortgages. And I was wondering if the city had either clinics for property owners, or what assistance might be available for them to cover those. And thank you.
Yasmin, do you want to take a stab at those questions? I'm happy to jump in if you'd like.
I'll let you take this one.
Okay. So I think it's worthwhile to mention that although our local ordinance does allow a tenant to give notice up to 30 days after the rent is due, there is no limitation on providing that notice in advance. And we do really encourage tenants, if they know that they cannot pay rent due to a financial impact from the pandemic, to have that conversation with their property owner, the leasing agent, or the building manager, whoever they pay rent to, as soon as possible. And so that everybody, as Yasmin mentioned in the presentation, is aware that of the situation. We do really encourage that conversation. We do not require any kind of a repayment plan, but if one is established, it would be an opportunity for both sides to come together and understand what the expectation is, the tenant and the property owner, in terms of paying that rent after the eviction moratorium period ends. In relation to support for property owners, certainly we need to emphasize that there is a small business loan from the Jewish Federation that the property owners are eligible for, I believe, as a small business. And so there is that local access to funds, in addition to the other benefits that property owners are receiving through the CARES Act. And, you know, it's really meaningful to emphasize and stress that if someone does have a mortgage out on a property, that there is a very good chance that they could qualify for up to 6 months of forbearance. And that's a powerful thing for someone who's owning property and has a mortgage to pay, because forbearance means that those payments are tacked on to the end of the term. And so you don't have to pay that money back. If you can't pay it now, you can't pay it in these next 6 months, you don't have to pay it back in the next 6 months. You get to pay it back at the end of your note. So we really encourage property owners to do some research, reach out, check the resources available on the website. We do have plenty of resources available for folks on our coronavirus webpage. That's weho.org/coronavirus. And certainly property owners are more than welcome to call us at the number that Yasmin's provided here on the screen, 323-848-6450, or drop us an email at rsh@weho.org. So I hope that I answered your questions, Commissioner Kerpes. Thank you.
Noonan, I think it's correct that if they don't remember the weho.org/coronavirus, I believe, isn't there just a tab at the top of the city's webpage to click on for all coronavirus related matters with the city?
All pages within our website has that banner. And so, yeah, certainly if you just type in weho.org, you'll get a link at the very top of all of our pages on our website that brings you to the coronavirus page.
Thank you. Commissioner Kerpes, anything further at this time? Go to Commissioner Maggio. Commissioner Maggio, do you have any questions or comments?
Commissioner Maggio, I believe that your microphone is muted. Perhaps, there you go.
Can you now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Yasmin, for the extensive report. It's been very helpful. A lot of things to remember here, but I'm glad we have an information line and so many wonderful resources and services to help so many people here that I talk to daily, and I'm asked a million questions and I can't answer them all, but now I can answer more. So thank you very much. No further questions.
Commissioner Martz, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. Yasmin, thank you very much. That was very helpful. I think it's always a good reminder to hear about all the different services and offerings of the city. A lot of times our residents, people like to poo-poo what the city does, but we heard a lot of what is available. I have a suggestion on a broader topic to Corey Plank. I recommended this to some of our council members is when the pandemic first started, I have a nonprofit that helps the homeless community, but we're too small to qualify for some of the contract requirements of the city to get service contracts, 1, 2, 3 years long. My recommendation was in this situation, other cities have it, Department of Mental Health, LA County has mini grants, and our nonprofit would have been able to jump in and help out our homeless residents if we had a little bit of funding. We have access to hand sanitizer, gloves, all those good things, but being a small nonprofit, funding is an issue. So my recommendation was LA Department of Mental Health, they do mini grants that have less strict requirements because the dollar amount is smaller. So they don't worry quite as much as, $1 million contract. So that was one recommendation that maybe not now, but for future service needs would be something the city could look at. And that's all I have.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
Thank you. I really appreciate Yasmin's report too, and all of the staff's work during this really difficult time when so many people are in financial crisis. I'm glad we have so many resources and that we've taken action to try to make sure that people don't lose their housing. I do have a few comments and questions. I wanted to clarify a sentence in the packet. It says there's an eviction defense where no 3-day notice or unlawful detainer will issue, I assume, during the emergency period or 12 months after the local emergency expires. Could you clarify that? Does that mean no matter what, it doesn't have to be COVID related? We have a 1-year period with no evictions at all?
It is if it's COVID related. So if the tenant is taking the steps mentioned of notifying their landlord in writing and providing the documentation or explanation that they are, not paying because of financial impact related to COVID-19. They're communicating about what their situation is and making every effort to either pay, establish a payment plan, taking those steps, that in that situation, they would not get a 3-day notice. Definitely if somebody is not communicating that or they're not providing any documentation, it's not a blanket protection against 3-day notices in general.
Okay, thank you. And I'm wondering how this was communicated. I saw there was a booklet that went to every property. I assume that's landlords. I know there's been a lot of great online outreach and mailings really challenging at this time, but was there any mailing to tenants or postcard from a tenant. I didn't see one, but I might have missed it because I'm being kind of careful with mail.
Yeah, so the eviction moratorium booklet was made available in Spanish and Russian and sent out to both tenants and landlords in the city. We did a webinar specifically just about the eviction moratorium. And then we did the second guidance on multifamily housing webinar that included, repeated the information about the eviction moratorium. We also made the information available through press releases, social media. So it went out in a number of different ways. But yeah, that's how we got it out.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. And I probably saw it, but it was a crazy, very busy time. So when I was trying not to touch mail. Wonderful. I wanted to make sure you guys had some really good information that was provided for landlords on social distancing. I'm wondering if they all get it and are implementing it. And I'm wondering, I'm sure staff in rent stabilization is very busy, but I've been signed up for an excursion and people from Plummer Park called like 5 times to ask if I was okay. So if there's extra staff that has time and they haven't already done it, I'm wondering if people are calling specifically to follow up with landlords to say, are you doing this? Do you get what you have to do? Maybe starting with the big landlords. And also maybe to ask about if they're having trouble paying their bills and helping with these, connecting with SBA loans, because I am also concerned about the landlords, both if they can't afford it and what that might mean for the housing itself if anyone had to sell as a result. So the question is, are there proactive phone calls to landlords? And if not, is that something that somewhere in the city that might have the bandwidth to do?
We're not doing proactive phone calls to landlords at this time. I can tell you that we've been averaging about a third of our call volume to the information line right now is related to the eviction moratorium, both from tenants and landlords. So we do have quite a few callers and a lot of interest. In our experience, I think we've noticed that people are very aware of our eviction moratorium. And I think that might just it's not just because of our local moratorium, but because of the many different layers and facets that are in play right now at the state level and locally. We have talked about reaching out to some of our bigger landlords. We have, in fact, actually spoken with some of them just by happenstance because, when tenants have called in or landlords have called in, we have provided a lot of more detailed guidance on utilizing the eviction moratorium, on following the local rules, and really we will, if someone calls us or sends us an email, we will walk them through the entire process from start to go, whether they're a tenant or a landlord. We also do have our mediation services available. And so if there are challenges with a tenant claiming their rights under the moratorium, we can do that as a first step to interact with a property owner who is unwilling or not interested in learning more about the program. So we have those in place. I don't think that we do have the capacity right now to per se do what you're suggesting as like a blanket a call to all of our 1,900 property owners in the city.
Understood. All right. Well, thank you again for all your great work. I'm sure I know you've been very busy and it's meant a lot to people to have that safety.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Topchin.
Thank you, Chair. Yasmin, thank you very much for the very detailed and informative presentation. I think it's very helpful for both landlords and tenants, provided everything that they probably need at this time. A couple of questions I think that would be for Manager Noonan. So I just to confirm, my understanding is that when everything is over and if a tenant files a complaint for rent reduction, let's say for the reduced swimming pool or hot tub or whatever, sauna, all this kind of services that under public health requirement were limited or reduced. So we're not going, the department is not going to pursue a rent decrease because of the emergency, local emergency declaration. Is that correct?
Well, under our hearings program, I believe a tenant would be able to file. However, we need to remember that a landlord does have 30 days to correct the issue. As you've correctly pointed out, this is a situation where the landlord was not allowed to open the facilities. Now we are reopening. I can tell you at this point, I don't believe that we received any hearings requests for rent reductions due to a loss of community amenities. And going forward, seeing that community amenities can be opened, I don't foresee that to be occurring.
Okay. Thank you. I think the other question would be, this is regarding the tenant paying rent issue. Well, the presentation on page 42, I believe, it says that the tenant must provide documentation to demonstrate the financial impact as a result of COVID-19, explaining the financial impact related to COVID-19 and the inability to pay rent. So some tenants may not have a document, a letter from their employer saying that you've been laid off or your income will be reduced. So the self statement or self-assertion written will satisfy that requirement or not?
That is correct.
Yep.
So you want to please take it away, Yasmin?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, so there's two options. A tenant can provide documentation with a statement. A tenant could also just provide the statement, an explanation. We do encourage tenants to really try to create a strong connection between how they have been financially impacted from the pandemic and their inability to pay rent. And so if there is anyone out there that has a question about what that explanation should include or could include, they're welcome to give us a call. We can do an initial review, make some suggestions, and then we'll certainly provide some resources for tenants so that they could seek legal advice if they need to, or a review by an outside agency such as the Coalition for Economic Survival, the Eviction Defense Network, or BetSetic Legal Resource Group.
Thank you. That completes my questions, Chair.
First, let's see if I muted. Yes. Yasmin, I just want to thank you for a really comprehensive and thorough explanation of the moratorium. I know that, so I'm sure the rest of the commission, we're all getting lots of questions from our neighbors and friends out in public. Just a question, if a tenant has been diagnosed COVID and they are isolating at home and there's a repair that must take place, a plumbing break, an appliance broken, I would assume that the repairmen, the workers, would need to wear a mask, wear a gloves, try to, even if it's a studio apartment, social distance as far away from the tenant as possible, perhaps wear disposable booties on their shoes. Do you have any other thoughts as to how a repairman that must do an emergency repair in a household where someone cannot leave and is COVID positive, how they can protect themselves?
I think that just about covers it. You know, making sure that ahead of time it is scheduled so that the tenant can isolate in their room if possible and are not going to be, you know, if this is in a living room or in the kitchen or something, that they're not in the same area as the staff member, and that windows be opened up, possibly use fans, leave the front door open in order to have the highest ventilation possible in the unit while they're in there. But all the steps that you mentioned, I think, are great prevention measures to take. But just that communication piece is really key, that the tenant knows when they're coming, and that the staff members are also told ahead of time, that maybe not specifically that someone is COVID-19 positive, but just in general, these are the steps that we should all be taking when entering into a household, that we're not, in going to be in close contact with someone that we're not quarantining with. That's what I would recommend.
Thank you. I wanted to reiterate a point that you brought up, that tenants are not required to enter into any kind of a term for repayment at this time. I had a West Hollywood resident whose landlord had an attorney send all the tenants a legal document requiring a DocuSign demanding certain terms of repayment. And fortunately, I sent that person straight to rent stabilization. They had a conversation with the property owner, property management. So just to reiterate, that there is no requirement that they enter into a repayment process. They have 12 months to repay it, but you don't, landlords cannot force you into a repayment process.
Correct. And that may be offered, and something that we are seeing happening in the community, but it's not something that is required, nor something that they can be evicted for if they don't enter into these agreements. But a landlord can go ahead and offer them. And in fact, we encourage communicating to and negotiating, making a plan that works for both the tenant and the landlord. But in no way is it a requirement.
Thank you. And I have some prepared remarks. I know you're all shocked about that, but I come at this from a slightly different perspective as a landlord. So with the city's moratorium on evictions, landlords are no longer landlords. We've been forced to become social service providers, providing free housing, or into the role of parents whose children to move back into their home rent-free. The city doesn't require any evidence that a tenant has been in any way financially impacted by COVID. I know there are far too many that have been impacted, either because they themselves were infected, or they're caring for someone who was infected, or their job was either impacted or eliminated due to COVID business shutdowns. I totally get that. But there ought to be some type of supporting evidence that the tenant is required to submit, because there are those who are attempting to game the system in a really sad way, take advantage of the pandemic. I can give you the following examples from both my tenants in a building I manage and from fellow landlords I've spoken with. One tenant, who was a trust fund baby, initially claimed she could not pay rent. That landlord asked if her trust no longer existed. She said it did, and she paid her rent. Another tenant, who was on permanent long-term disability and SSDI, made the same claim. And when the landlord asked if he was no longer in disability, he said he was and paid. In both cases, these tenants' initial response was the same. No one else is paying rent. Why should we? As if they were entitled to free rent. If tenants were required within a reasonable time frame, and I think 30 days is more than reasonable, to prove up how they have been impacted, that would be far more fair. I have one tenant who verbally told the owner he was impacted and could not pay rent. We sent him a letter with the city's COVID resource link and verbatim language from the city on the tenant's rights and requirements during the moratorium if they were unable to pay rent, along with copies of the city's forms. We told him he could use the city form or just send us a letter explaining, with no supporting documentation, just how he had been impacted within 30 days. He waited 40 days and still offered no explanation, just that he would not pay rent. This tenant was living in his Palm Springs home, subleasing his West Hollywood apartment under a very old lease that had no prohibition against subleasing. How is this blatant noncompliance fair? With the city mandating that tenants have a full 12 months post-moratorium to repay the rent that was due during the moratorium, I have a number of concerns. First, for those that were already living paycheck to paycheck and are now unemployed or underemployed, I fear they will never be able to catch up unless a government entity steps in with rental vouchers. We have a whole class of employees here in the LA region that I have always called AMWs, actor, model, waiter. Young people trying to get into the entertainment industry who supported themselves by cater waitering or in a restaurant or bartending, and I fear that at least half of those jobs will never return. Those former employees will not be able to make a living in this new gig economy. Driving, delivering, which many companies barely comes out to minimum wages. I fear that tenants will ride out those 12 months, and then rather than pay what they owe in back rent, they will just walk away. Because of the city's mandate, the landlords will now be further financially impacted. The only recourse will be to go to court, a time-consuming and expensive proposition, and even with a judgment, it can be difficult to collect on the judgment. The city offers guaranteed right to legal counsel for our residents facing eviction, yet we offer absolutely no resources to our landlords. I know many people think that our landlords are rich, and who cares if they lose some rental income? But here in West Hollywood, the vast majority of our landlords are small business owners like myself that have one building that we depend on for our income, and the city has taken that away. We provide rental housing, we pay our taxes, we employ people for maintenance, landscaping, repairs, or we do the work ourselves. Those of you who've been on this commission for a while have heard me speak passionately a number of times that one of my core beliefs is that housing at a price you can afford is a fundamental, universal human entitlement, period. Landlords provide a valuable commodity, and yet we're being treated as if we don't matter. How can that be fair? I got an email today from the Apartment Owners Association of Greater Los Angeles. They have filed a lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles, a constitutional challenge that essentially argues that the city's prohibition imposed on residential landlords from undertaking eviction procedures for tenants financially or otherwise impacted by the pandemic singles out landlords and property owners to absorb the residents' claimed economic losses attendant to the crisis, and further asserts the city's eviction ban illegally modifies existing contractual relationships. So I know this was filed in the city of Los Angeles, but I would suspect there will be more lawsuits filed in other jurisdictions. I've heard talk from tenants that rent should just be canceled. Unfortunately, our city council stated that it would be a theft by taking and unconstitutional. I'd like to make a couple points for future consideration. One, require any tenants who are not paying rent during the moratorium to prove up how they've been affected. A letter from their doctor or from their family member's doctor they've been caring for, or some evidence that where they worked has been closed. For gig economy workers, they could show a redacted bank statement, pre-sheltered home that shows their income, and then one post-sheltered home that shows no or minimal income. For tenants who do not pay their current rent post-moratorium, landlords must be allowed to file a just cause eviction within 30 days of the end of the moratorium. Second, the city needs to make a determination on what actions landlords may legally take for tenants who did not pay rent during the moratorium, but did not follow the city's guidelines to do so. And third, offer assistance to those landlords whose tenants do not repay the back rent within 12 months, either through a right to counsel for those landlords or grants to make up that lost rent. A little lengthy, but those are my comments. Thank you. Moving on to item 11 on our agenda.
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, let me go back from your screen. Yes, Commissioner Kerpes, you raise your hand. Sorry.
Yeah, I did have a couple of comments regarding the same item. I did have a question, an additional question that just came up about the 3-day notice. I understand that they are protected from a 3-day notice in situations where it's COVID related, but they're not in non-COVID related. How would you advise the tenant to respond when they get a 3-day notices? One could be a tenant harassment and one could not be. One could be a valid one that they needed to follow. What do we do in those situations? Or what's a general rule that tenants should know if they receive something like that?
Any tenant that receives a 3-day notice should give us a call or drop us an email, rsh@weho.org, 323-848-6450. The rent stabilization ordinance does require that any 3-day notice be filed with the city. And so property owners should be filing those 3-day notices with us. We are receiving those and we are reviewing 3-day notices as they come in.
Are those required to be submitted to the city all the time or just during for this purpose?
No, this is a standing requirement that has been in place for a very long time.
Okay, and then I just had a couple of comments in response to some of the comments you made, Mr. Chair. 68% of the people who qualify for unemployment today will qualify for unemployment benefits will actually receive more benefits than what they actually make as income currently. The problem that we're seeing is that I can tell you in Assemblymember Bloom's office, we have over 1,000 cases where 1,000 households that have applied for unemployment benefits and have not received their benefits, some of them dating back to early March. So many of these people will be able to pay back these loans or pay back the rent. But the system itself is so overwhelmed that there's no way that we can get benefits out to people to be able to cover their rents. And if somebody, if I were to tell you, I mean, I'm in a little bit different wage bracket, but if I were making a little bit less money right now and I went into unemployment and went to my landlord and said, I lost my job, I can't afford rent, but I'm going to sign up for unemployment. Well, I'm making the same or more money on unemployment right now under the pandemic unemployment assistance program. So I should still be able to pay rent, even though that may not be the case. So we're not asking landlords to foot the bill. We're asking everyone to kind of stay in place because the alternative is that people become homeless, and that would be a problem for all of us on several levels. So yes, we do need to do more for property owners to connect them with the programs that are out there that exist. Many of them are not applying for these programs, even though they do exist. Many of them are not being proactive and contacting their mortgage lender because it is their responsibility to contact their mortgage lender for these these protections to kick in. So I would like to see the city do a little bit more in that area, advertise a little bit more in that area for some of our property owners that have the smaller properties. I don't think the larger properties have as much of a problem. They're more well established. They have diversified incomes from the various tenants. But to say that the landlords are footing the bill, I'm sorry, I don't buy that. This is not a normal, they chose to get into this investment system where they provide an essential service like housing. That's the good and bad. And we're in one of the worst moments right now that I think that any of us could think of in terms of the financial crisis that we're in. So we all need to, do our part. And I feel bad for landlords, but everyone just needs to stay in place right now, and no one should be kicked out of their home because they can't pay rent right now. And I even support what going as far as what I believe it was Councilmember Duran and maybe one other council member, that even for criminal acts that would be a violation of your lease but may not get you arrested, those people also should not be removed from their homes right now. We can deal with that later at a later date, but people should not be displaced right now or be sent to jail for small crimes. Thank you.
Vice Chair Topchin. Vice Chair Topchin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question came up when I was listening to your comments, Chair, and it's true that a lot of landlords they have obviously they probably have questions about the tenants being unable to pay the rent due to financial impacts. And maybe Ms. Regan, maybe you can provide a little bit more information what the financial impacts could be, what would financial impacts would constitute. Would that be only losing a job or having the income reduced, or there could be some other circumstances? For example, if somebody didn't lose the job but has to pay a big portion of the income to take care of the I don't know, a grandmother who's sick with COVID, or to take care of the kids that are at home because the schools are closed. So is it only the loss of the job, or it's something else? What are the circumstances that relate to the financial impact due to COVID-19, if you could explain?
Yasmin, would you like to take a start at this?
I actually asked Allison, but it doesn't matter, whoever you guys decide.
Sure. I mean, the ordinance does lay out a number of examples of financial impacts related to COVID that aren't just because of the job loss. And they're what you mentioned, Vice Chair, have childcare needs, or if you're required to isolate and you can't report to your job for whatever reason. So the urgency ordinance itself does lay out a number of examples. It's not exhaustive, but it's a number of examples. And whatever the reason is should be provided in the explanation that the tenant gives to the landlord in the notice.
Thank you, Ms. Regan. And I think that's important for the landlord community to understand that if they see the tenant goes to work every morning, but then the tenant didn't pay the rent, and the tenant claims that this is because of COVID-19, obviously the tenant is required to provide explanation, but that's also could be, there could be some other reasons, not just the loss of the job or income in that matter. So that's why I wanted the landlord community to hear that and to be able to, have that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any other questions or comments from my fellow commissioners at this point? And I apologize for missing a couple of you. I'm trying to toggle between two screens and I missed.
I wanted to show very briefly one of the FAQs that's available on our website in response to Commissioner Topchian's question. And here it lists what kind of documentation or explanations of financial impacts related to COVID-19 might include, which is proof of being sick, letters, emails, texts, photos related to layoff or loss of hours, the health authority communications, medical bills, receipts of childcare costs. So this is something that is available to all community members to provide a guidance just on what we mean when we talk about documentation and explanation of financial impacts.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Any further comments or questions at this time? And we will go to, we have no unfinished business. Do we have any further public comments at this time?
Not at this time.
Thank you. On to item 12, commission comments. My fellow commissioners, have any comments at this point? Commissioner O'Keefe.
Yes. So earlier in the meeting, Stabilization Manager Noonan mentioned potentially doing our annual study session in August. I think we still haven't gotten our priorities approved, or maybe we have, but we haven't started work on them from last year. So I believe we had discussed maybe waiting till January or so for our next annual meeting. And my suggestion would be that we go ahead and do that so we can finish the last batch, unless there's so much new with COVID that we just want to do new priorities anyways. But unless that's the case, I think we should wait till the old ones are approved, we worked on them, and then give it another 6 months or so. So question, were our priorities approved or still no?
So no, your priorities were tabled and we have not brought them back to the city council yet. The commission may, given the new direction, the clarity on your purview, the commission may want to, using that purview clarity, review your priorities and confirm what priorities you have. I know that you've been almost an entire year without priorities. We are coming up on the August date, so the commission could consider that date an opportunity to look at your priorities in the light of the focus on the rent stabilization program and confirm and make sure if all of your priorities fit within that purview.
I think that'd be easy to do pretty quickly without having to wait till August. I believe most or all of them did. So my inclination would be maybe we could just individually look at them on our own and then discuss it before then. But either way.
Commissioner Kerpes.
On Commissioner O'Keefe's point, I think, yeah, that anything that's outside of our purview, I think, will be stopped. So we won't be moving forward on any of that. But there will also be a council election in November. So maybe we maybe not wait till January, but we do wait till November, December to do our retreat. So that it lines up with whatever the next council will approve our work product. That'd be my suggestion.
So Commissioner O'Keefe, would you be proposing that we agendize a discussion of the existing priorities prior to August at a date to be determined by staff?
Yeah, just to briefly go through each of them and see if they fit with our purview or not still.
That's my
That would be my suggestion.
commissioners, if they would be amenable to placing that on the agenda. Mr. Noonan.
First, Commissioner Charity had his hand up first. No, okay.
I just wanted to be in agreement and not just sit here and stare at you.
So why don't we do this? Since the June 25th meeting, the item that evening is the announcement of the annual general adjustment. That typically is a short item. Why don't we also, staff will place your priorities on that night. And so you can review those and indicate which move forward. And then that will give us the opportunity to place those on the council agenda for July 6th. And then those would be available coming August 13th. Of course, as you recall, your July meetings, July 9th and July 23rd, both have 2 appeals each night. And the commission has told staff that you would not want to have any other items on meetings where you have 2 appeals. So we wouldn't consider scheduling anything in addition on those nights as it is.
Commissioner Kerpes?
If we're gonna move the other things forward, is it possible to move the discussion on the RSO deposit interest formula for 2020 up as well? Just a little bit sooner. I don't care when, just it seems like it's been a long time since I've asked for it.
Yeah, and it has been a little while since you've asked for that. So yes, let me see what we can do.
Thank you.
So I would suggest that perhaps, Mr. Noonan, if you could resend out our priorities and then add one column, that document going whether it is under our purview or no longer under our purview, which may help us clarify that rather quickly. And we could place it on the agenda for our next meeting. Would that be approved by the commission?
Yeah, I think that we can do that. I don't want to guarantee that I'll have the opportunity to send it out in advance of the packet with the meeting, since it is a quick turnaround for the 25th, but we will make our best effort to do that. If not, we will have the item in the packet and we will look at creating some kind of a recommendation. I think your purview seems to be pretty clear. I think, as I think Commissioner Kerpes pointed out, that I think that the commissioners may make a clear distinction between what would be in and what would not be in the purview.
Thank you. Any other commission comments at this time? I'll just make a few that it is really good to see all of you. We've done our best to stay in contact virtually and email and texting. And I just really want to commend staff. I think one of the beauties of living in a small town is, Pete Noonan called me at home the first week of the shelter in place to make sure that I was okay. Did I have food? Did I need anything? City council members calling me at home to check in. No other city, if I lived 2 blocks away in the city of Los Angeles, nothing, but our city staff and our council members have taken extraordinary care of us. I also want to take the chance to commend our sheriffs. Things were a little crazy, very close by to West Hollywood. And at least here on the east side, I have felt totally safe within the hours of curfew out walking my dogs. So I want to commend city staff, city council, and the sheriff's department for taking such good care of the residents during this crisis. It is thoroughly appreciated. And are there any further staff comments?
I think that some staff do have comments, looking to either legal counsel, Allison Regan, or Corey Plank, if you have anything you would like to say. I do want to make one announcement, and I'm very sad to have to share this, but our commission secretary, Janine Sherrard, has let me know that her last day will be the 18th of this month. And so she has really served the commission, I think, very well, and she's done a really great job in the division. And now she's not a permanent employee, but she treated us and she took on the job and the responsibilities as if she was. And I really can't thank her enough for all of her great work that she's provided. So thank you, Janine.
Oh, thank you.
And silent applause.
And I would just add, thank you to Janine for helping us also transition to this virtual world, and thanks to staff for making it possible. I think Yasmin getting a presentation ready for this new kind of meeting format, and actually thank all of you for your willingness to jump in and try something new and different. I think we've had a few of these meetings come online, watching council do their work. Human Services Commission met for the first time virtually this week as well. And this has gone as smoothly as I think a first virtual meeting could go. And that's a credit to all of you and all of you being so prepared for the conversation. So thank you for all your work.
Any further comments?
Yes, last comment. I do want to, I'm hoping to put him on the spot here quickly, because as we are saying farewell to Janine Sherrard, I'd also like the commission to welcome Roger Vinalon. Roger began with us just last Monday. I have yet to send out the all staff internally, so we're just rolling this out slowly. It's been a little interesting to onboard a new staff member at this time of working remotely, but Roger Vinalon is coming in as the new Rent Stabilization Commission Secretary. So welcome to Roger.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. And I think those are our comments. Thank you so much. I echo Corey's sentiment. This has gone really smoothly. And Chair, sometimes I have wished to send you into space, and I think that you just did it for me. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
And you may have the opportunity again. And with that, I'm going to adjourn till our next meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission, 7 p.m. Thursday, June 25, 2020, via teleconference.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone.
We'll miss you, Janine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Best of luck in whatever your next step is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Janine.
Hello, WeHo. It's Eddie Robinson from WeHo TV News. If you've stocked up on all the essentials for your pantry and you need a break from cooking your own meals during the Safer at Home order, why not spice it up a little and support your favorite local West Hollywood restaurant? Go to weho.org/coronavirus for a list of West Hollywood restaurants that are open for takeout or delivery during the coronavirus pandemic. You can coordinate with some friends, order a meal from the same restaurant, and have a virtual dinner party. Or have you been meaning to try a dish from that amazing WeHo restaurant you've only heard about but never experienced for yourself? There's no time like the present and absolutely no dress code at home. As we create new routines while staying put, it's okay to get in the habit of stepping out of our comfort zones, including new flavors of food. Visit weho.org/coronavirus for more tips and resources, and follow @WeHo City on all social media for the latest updates from the city of West Hollywood.
The City of West Hollywood is here to assist older adults who are at higher risk of serious illness from COVID-19. Public health officials warn that people aged 65 and older should stay home and stay away from other people. Please avoid groups and maintain social distancing. Wash your hands often and do not touch your face. If you must go out for groceries, the City of West Hollywood has compiled a roster of grocers